Welcome back to the Local Government and Community Leadership on Renewable Energy in Wisconsin panel discussion. We have some wonderful participants here, some speakers who are going to really tell you about great things happening in Wisconsin communities. And I can't wait to dig into the discussion. Um, in our conversation today, we're going to talk about how over a third of Wisconsin residents live in communities with ambitious renewable energy commitments. Local governments and tribes from Racine to Eau Claire to River Falls to Dane County are shifting to electric vehicle fleets, installing solar power, promoting residential and commercial use of renewables, and working with utilities to decarbonize their energy mix. So we're going to discuss today how leaders are bringing their clean energy ideas to fruition and how renewable energy is benefiting Wisconsin communities. Thanks for being here, and thank you to Green Penny for sponsoring this session. We're not going to do PowerPoints. We're going to have a dynamic back and forth, so I encourage you to be thinking about questions, putting them in the Q&A, and thinking about what you want to get out of this session. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Daniel Wiggins Jr., project lead for the Bad River Natural Resources Department. He is the tribe's project lead for the It Catches Fire solar microgrid project, originally awarded through the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Indian Energy in 2019. Daniel has been responsible for renewable energy activities since 2017, specifically leading the planning and development of energy projects on the Bad River Reservation. Through this project, the tribe is installing over 500 kW of solar with over 1,000 kilowatt hours of battery storage at 3 tribal facilities. 2 of the 3 will offset the entire facility electrical loads and offer a level of resiliency if the power goes out that can last potentially weeks, if not longer. And if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to the event hub and see the PowerPoint that we've posted there from Daniel Wiggins Jr., and you can look at project details, but we'll dive into the discussion in just a moment. My next panelist is Kathy Kuntz, the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change Director. She has more than 25 years of experience influencing consumers, businesses, and whole communities to adopt sustainable practices and technologies. Her work spans energy and water efficiency, transportation, waste reduction, beneficial electrification, and renewable energy. Prior to joining Dane County, Kathy led Cool Choices, a nonprofit that works with businesses and local governments to encourage sustainable practices. And previous to that, she led Focus on Energy, Wisconsin's statewide energy efficiency and renewable energy program. On a personal level, Kathy's house features a 3.2 kilowatt PV system that provides about 95% of the power for their house and their electric car. She likes to brag that her installation in 2008 helped to spur the 90% drop in solar costs for the rest of us. And our final speaker is Ned Noel, Senior Planner for the City of Eau Claire. Mr. Noel has been a city planner for 18 years. He's worked in the Twin Cities and the Eau Claire markets. He specializes in sustainability for the City of Eau Claire, working on clean energy and climate solutions for the community and municipal operations. He graduated from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities with a BA in Geography and Urban Planning. The City of Eau Claire has been a leader on renewable energy, establishing ambitious energy goals, partnering with local utility Xcel Energy, and in February 2020, releasing an ambitious renewable energy action plan. So as I mentioned, we're not doing PowerPoint for this session, which is very exciting, but I encourage you to check out the event hub where you can find links to Eau Claire's Renewable Energy Action Plan. You can find the Dane County Climate Change Action Plan, and you can find a PowerPoint about the Bad River microgrid project. So it's a, what do you call it? There's lots of dynamism in today's session, so you can really dig into the material as much as you like. All right, thank you for being here today. Thank you to all our speakers. I'm going to start out with a question, and this question will be for Daniel Wiggins Jr. What inspired leaders and members of the Bad River tribe to work on renewable energy?
Oh, thank you, Heather. And yeah, I'll give you a break for a little bit. That was a long introduction there.
It was.
And I appreciate it. Appreciate it too. Great question. I think a lot of this just doesn't happen overnight. I think with any type of energy projects, there's a lot of strategic planning and stuff. that even predates myself. Like I said, I started in 2017, and I fell into a lot of great work, a lot of great feasibility studies, a lot of work products that through legal and stuff of sorts. So I think a lot of this started when people started realizing climate change and just the benefits of cleaner energy. But to get more specific to my project, the tribe did go through a strategic energy planning in 2012, 2017. And then all of a sudden, I think northern Wisconsin, I don't want to say all of a sudden, but northern Wisconsin got hit by a flood in 2016, which again highlighted certain gaps and stuff within the energy sector of the tribe. One of the specific things that it hit was critical infrastructure and identified gaps in the resiliency within the community. And I think the tribal leadership really seen those, and it was really transparent on kind of the capacity of the utilities, but also the critical infrastructure that the tribe wouldn't want to go out. So kind of, a combination of, just being prepared with the strategic energy planning and getting leaders to buy in over time, and then, events, whether they're unfortunate or fortunate, do happen. And I think they can highlight, tremendous gaps and straightforward projects within the community. And with all of those events and strategic plannings, we kind of use those to identify, the project at hand, which we do call Ishkonede Nawadede, which you highlighted, which means it catches fire.
I apologize. I had to use a translated version of that.
No worries. My team still has a tough time, and we've been working with it for about 2 years now. So it is a tough name.
It's a lovely name, though. I love the name It Catches Fire. That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Daniel. And I'd like to turn to Ned and ask you the same thing. In the city of Eau Claire, what inspired leaders and members of the community to get started working on renewable energy?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Yeah, it's great to be a part of this panel and with these other distinguished colleagues. So yeah, from my experience, I started with the city of Eau Claire in 2007, actually. So I've had the privilege to, kind of see our journey since then. There was some work that was done before that with our wastewater treatment plant with biodigestion. So, we did do some renewable energy work prior to, like 30 plus years ago. But from what I saw and what I recall is that, a lot of the beginnings of our concerted effort was with some local citizens that really started to talk to our electeds and to try to push the needle forward. Our city manager at the time, Mike Huggins, set the tone then thereafter about doing a comprehensive plan or adding sustainability, renewable energy into our comprehensive plan, and then also forming a green team within city government so that the different departments would be working together on projects. And so since then, it's really just grown and evolved, and more and more has added to that foundation. And like I said, I've been very lucky to be involved in it. Wasn't something that was on my job description, but I love that this has kind of fallen into my lap, so to speak, and to be a part of this leadership. So that's been really exciting to see how it's also helped my own career, contributing to a community like Eau Claire. So the other thing I'll mention just real quick is that it's ironic too when things happen and you don't expect them to. But when President Trump reneged on the Paris Agreement, that actually lit a fire in our city council bellies to say, hey, we need to actually set goals in alignment with the Paris Agreement. What can we do locally if the federal government's not going to take initiative? And so then they set forth, a study in terms of what the community thinks. We did a survey. The community wanted to support renewable goals and climate goals. And then they adopted very ambitious 2050 goals of carbon neutrality and 100% renewable energy. So that was an interesting twist of fate in terms of what happened with the president, but it moved us forward.
Absolutely. And thank you, Ned. Eau Claire's journey is particularly fascinating, so I can't wait to learn more. Kathy, would you tell us what inspired Dane County to begin implementing projects and write a climate action plan?
Definitely. And thanks for having me as part of this discussion. My response is a bit similar to what you just heard from Ned and Daniel. I was on a actually on a talk just last night with the county executive for a local community group. And he said that he created our office 3.5 years ago because he decided we couldn't wait for others to act, that this was very much about the climate crisis and the sense that the federal government, and at that point, the state government, were not leading on climate action, and we're Dane County, we can do these things. We too had some history of doing renewable energy projects. I think the two things I want to point out that maybe fueled our efforts in the last few years. So we had that commitment from the top and certainly from our citizens about acting, greatly helped by the fact that the math works, that our electeds can talk about projects like our new airport solar project, where we're saving $140,000 a year on our electric costs and no out-of-pocket money. I mean, that's a great story for elected officials to tell. So the math is helping a ton at this moment. The other thing is, when our officials talk about these projects, the feedback they get from citizens is wild enthusiasm. And there aren't very many things right now that our government officials see enthusiasm around. And so I think we can't discount how important that is too, to really having the momentum that we've got to move forward. It's that enthusiasm, and the math works, and we're reducing risks. It's all together a good thing.
You know, that's really interesting. There's local governments, tribes, and other community leaders have really stepped up to fill a gap where there was a lack of federal leadership, and previously also a lack of state leadership. But as you said, that's really interesting, the concept of a vision, setting a vision, a positive vision forward. There needs to be something for community members, community leaders to look forward to and to talk about that's progress. And I do think that renewable energy is unique in offering something that, from a bipartisan perspective and from an economic perspective, makes sense and looks forward in a way that a lot of other issues that local government officials have to deal with don't. You know, there's a lot of difficult issues, and especially when you have the budget on your side, that's very, very helpful. So I'm going to keep my eye on the questions. The Q&A section. Please go ahead and add your questions in there. But I have one more question before we turn to audience questions. This one's, I'm going to start with Kathy here. How do coalition efforts and partnerships between community groups provide support for your effort? What are the key resources people participating in this call who want their community shift to renewable energy can think about tapping into? How can they access more support for their community?
So it's a great question, Heather. Thanks. So Dane County participates in several national initiatives, coalitions around climate action and clean energy at this point. And that can be really helpful in terms of ideas, but it's also challenging because those folks are often not in Wisconsin. They don't have our utility structure. They don't have our regulatory structure. We've been, particularly as we started closing in on our climate action plan, we've been trying to collaborate and work with other Wisconsin communities. Ned and I talk frequently about things. And so as an example, under Ned's leadership in Eau Claire developed a net zero energy building guide, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
If you go to the Dane County website, you will see links to the Eau Claire building guide. And people have said to me, well, when are you going to do a Dane County building guide? I'm like, I don't need to. Ned did a fantastic building guide. And so, you know, thinking about how we collaborate and really build upon each other. In addition to that, increasingly, you mentioned 1 in 3 people in Wisconsin are living in these communities with ambitious climate and clean energy goals. We're starting to talk as communities about how we come together as a coalition to influence some of those state policies in particular that might be making our efforts harder than they need to be. You know, as we talk, we become more acutely aware that some communities have advantages from their utilities that other communities don't have. Not talking about Ned here or anything, but there are in terms of data and resources. And so we're just trying to figure out how do we help all communities achieve their goals more rapidly. And so that effort is really in a nascent stage. We're still kind of figuring it out. I would say anyone who's in a community with ambitious goals who wants to hear more about that should reach out to me, and I'm happy to kind of connect them to what we're doing there.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting some great questions jumping in here. One of them is a little bit technical about the Bad River microgrid project. So I'm going to turn this over to Daniel. We mentioned that your storage could last for up to weeks of energy backups. Can you tell us a little bit more about the technology you're using? Are you using batteries? How's that system going to work really in practice to provide resilience for the community?
Oh wow, that's a great question for my engineers. But I'm going to do my best to give you an answer to that, because it is a solar microgrid, so we are using a combination of solar photovoltaics and a battery backup. So the batteries are a huge component, and probably one of the amazing components of our system. The fortunate thing is we also have backup generators on each of the facilities. So it's a combination of solar, batteries, and generation. Fortunately, it's still being designed where the solar and the batteries are the primary when emergency function. And, hopefully we'll not have to rely on the generator as much. It's still promoting kind of the cleaner energy focus of the project and stuff.
Can I ask what your timeline is for construction? And
yeah, absolutely. We are in the middle of construction right now, and we are actually in the middle of placing batteries on the ground. So I think at one facility we do have one battery bank. At the two larger facilities, those are anticipated for February, and we are anticipating commissioning for March.
That'll be something to celebrate in 2020.
It will be exciting, and the tribe is planning kind of a virtual event and stuff. So hopefully it can be shared with the group.
Absolutely. Okay, so a great question here from Lauren Regg of Renew Wisconsin. She's asking, how can residents engage with this work and show our support? How do we push our local governments, our tribes, and our other community organizations to accelerate this work? And how is that different in Indigenous communities? So I'm going to start with Kathy, and then we'll go around and talk about how can local residents make this happen.
So I will tell you, in Dane County, local residents are helping make this happen. So the local 350 Madison group in particular has these local government teams that hold local governments accountable for the goals we set. There's a 350 Madison team dedicated to Dane County who reaches out to me and says, hey, what's the progress on this? And I think there are lots of ways that could be organized, but it's really important that citizens keep pushing communities. Setting goals is terrific, but I want people asking me where our outcomes are. And so we try to hold some public events to engage folks around that. But honestly, in a pandemic, it's a little tricky. And I think too often we end up sort of talking to the regular crowd and not talking to everyone. Sandra Henry's talk this morning was a really important one. We all need to think about how we're ensuring everyone is in this conversation. And that's a challenge right now in the digital space.
Right. Ned, do you want to chime in there? How are local residents really driving what's been happening in your community? And as you continue, you're pretty far along on the renewable energy transition relative to other communities. So what do they do today when you've got a lot of ordinances in place and a lot of action plans on the books? What do local residents need to do to make sure everything gets implemented?
Yeah, I think we've really tried to take the point of view of encourage and empower rather than regulate. That there's a time and place for that, but to really arm our residents and businesses with the resources that already exist. We have such a great focus on energy program, our utilities, extra incentives that are available, matching focus on energy from Excel, for example. So, there's a lot of great resources available, and sometimes people are unsure, they're of the unknown. They need a little bit more education, a little hand holding, if you will. So we'd like to do a campaign this year. It was derailed with COVID last year, but to work in like action teams using a workbook and other, the resources. So deploy that this year with our local nature center, so we can reach not only the city of Eau Claire, but our suburbs and our county as well. So that's one thing we've got up our sleeves in terms of empowering the residents. But historically, we already have very good participation in focus programs, one of the highest concentrations in the state. So I think we've got a very intelligent population for the most part when it comes to energy use, but we can still do so much more. In our renewable action plan that you had mentioned, we do have sub-annual goals that really align with focus programs for energy efficiency and renewables. So those we're going to keep monitoring with our data supply, or the data that we get from focus and our utilities as well, to keep kind of that accountability, like Kathy mentioned, like how are we actually doing annually, biannually, and so on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Daniel, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think Ned and Kathy did a great job, and I'm probably just going to reiterate some of the things they said. But I think some of the straightforward things is just identifying what's already there, identifying the resources, and kind of the incentives that are out there. Even with the utilities and stuff, some of the residents don't even know what's available to them. And then I think Kathy and Ned also highlighted, making sure they're involved in the strategic planning and outreach events. If you can hold outreach events and gather information, those are valuable data right there. That's kind of the incentive right there, pushing the projects. And local residents is what makes it happen. Ideally, it is really what pushes these projects, and really the projects can really feed back into the community. So once you get these large projects here, and get the industry kind of a part of the community and get them seen, the residents just start asking the right questions and start, bringing the information to you. Trust me, I'm bombarded with, how can residents get involved? How can we, get solar panels on my roof now? And these are great questions. Do I have all the answers? No, I don't have all the answers. But again, we can identify the resources, make sure they're involved and get them at the table, and make sure the community is a part of the project.
I have a question for you from Thomas Eggert, and this is for, let's start with Ned, and then we'll go around the room. He says, Wisconsin is at best a purple state, and we have many communities that are conservatively oriented. How do you start the conversation with someone from Rhinelander or Wausau about why they might embrace and support renewable energy?
Yeah, great question. I think, like we had mentioned, energy in itself is nonpartisan. So, we all use energy, we all need it. It's fundamental to the way we live in modern society. So just beginning with the fact that energy is critical to be more aware of how energy is so important in our lives. So, having a conversation about it that way. And then, like, I think Kathy had alluded to it, but the economics are there now. The incentives are also on top of that, but, we're seeing even, conservative groups here in Wisconsin now see the value, the economic development potential of renewables, and it's only going to grow. And so I think, local governments that obviously they have elected officials that, set the tone and goals for their organizations and their communities. But if they are late to the game, so to speak, they're going to be missing out on some of this development, these jobs that might, either go outstate or into other communities that they're competing with. So it's time to start turning the page in our state, and I think we're there. But it's going to take some more time too, and people, I suppose, in those communities that are frustrated that their electeds have not actually, done something like what our other communities have done with goals and such. Obviously, speak to their electeds and voice those concerns. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want to weigh in there?
Sure. Yeah, just to sort of build on that, the economics. So to give people a sense of this, our airport solar project, we leased land at the Dane County Airport to MG&E. They built a solar array. We promised to buy the power from it, and we're buying it at a lower rate than we were buying power before. So we're saving $140,000. We had no money out of pocket. There's an airport in Wausau. I bet they have some land that, I mean, there's land near every airport that isn't that good for a lot of things. It's too close for other building projects. This is a solution there. So the economics are really good. The other thing I want to say, and it's, Green Bay has set ambitious clean energy goals now. It's not just Madison and Milwaukee kinds of folks doing this. And I think part of that is when Eau Claire started being really prominent in the clean energy space, there was a whole discussion about how that was attracting millennials to Eau Claire and that Eau Claire was the new cool place to live. I bet I saw 5 articles about, and I know other community leaders saw those and went, well, where are the Gen Zers who want to come live in our community? This is part of how you present as you're a forward-thinking community. That's a piece of what Wausau and Rhinelanders should be thinking about today.
Yeah, and let me add to that 2 specific stories that I'd like to share. We have partners, all over the state, and we have some leaders from fairly conservative, what you would call conservative counties in Wisconsin, who are doing a couple different things. Some of them are considering solar on county land as a revenue generator, sort of a larger scale project, which is exciting. They would lease the land and that would support their county budget. And that's what they're hoping to do. There are also groups like the Green Team in Waukesha County, which are working with each individual municipality in Waukesha to help them identify what might be their own sustainability goals and how can the community organizers support those groups. And they are, about a year ago or 2 years ago, they started having those conversations, but they've made a lot of headway once people who are not exposed to these topics gain more understanding, they gain information about the economic benefits. And so there's a lot of different strategies and a lot of different roles that renewable energy can play for communities on any part of the political spectrum. It's renewable energy has bipartisan support. Wind and solar pull at 75% support for both. More for those are registered as Democrats, but 75% of folks who register as Republicans generally support wind and solar. So luckily, this is not a political issue. This is a win-win-win for most communities. I saw a great question here. Kathy, you mentioned airports, and we got a great question from Don Wickert. How can other Wisconsin communities use the Dane County model to save big bucks by installing solar without upfront costs? What are the opportunities and barriers? And I feel like airports might have something to do with the answer.
So, well, sure, but there are other, really what we did is we approached our utility and we said, we're really interested in renewable energy at scale. We don't have enough rooftops to get there. We have solar on most of our rooftops. That's a tiny fraction of our usage. So we worked with them to co-create a project. And we're seeing more and more of those projects. Every community in the state has that opportunity to reach out to their utility and say, hey, what can we do? The projects look really different for Ned and for Daniel because they're different utilities and there's, different needs. But there is, I think, a lot of opportunity. Definitely, we'd like to see more opportunity in that space. There's work at the commission right now looking at parallel generation and how maybe that becomes easier for communities to work with their utilities. But I think the opportunities are there for folks to push this opportunity. And again, the folks leading are likely to see jobs and benefits that those at the end of the line might not see in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we have a lot of energy in the room here, in the virtual room, and I'd love to know where folks who are clean energy advocates, what communities you're from in Wisconsin. Let us know in the chat. Tell us what community you're working to help transition to renewable energy. We'd love to see where you hail from, even if you're from outside Wisconsin. So let me ask another question. We've got a great question here from Elizabeth Hittman at the City of Milwaukee. Do you have any lessons learned from renewable energy projects that you've completed, or amazing microgrid projects that might be under construction? Any challenges you've encountered, lessons that we can share with other communities in Wisconsin? So I'll turn that over to Daniel, since you're in the midst of construction right now.
Well, plenty of lessons learned. I think one of the biggest lessons learned is just transparency and communication. Again, not just with, I think we've emphasized kind of the community, but I kind of back to the other question, you know, also leadership. I think you're going to have both sides of the spectrum, always on the leadership board or, you know, council or whatever it is, and making sure you're transparent with the project details, with the financials, and that they're very aware of how that is structured and how it benefits, because you guys said it benefits everybody. These are projects that are win-win-win for the utility and almost all the stakeholders. So I think that's a big key right there.
Absolutely.
Plenty of other lessons learned, though I don't know if I can get into all of them.
Let's let Ned and Kathy weigh in on any project lessons if you want to dive into those specifics.
Yeah, I guess patience and perseverance come to mind. You know, with our community solar garden that was built in 2017 in the city, it was on a landfill that we owned. And, you know, initially there was reluctance from the utility Excel about us having a project within, you know, that kind of scale. It was only 1 megawatt, but still. And, you know, as we worked together, you know, they started to see that, hey, this is what our Sustainability Commission is trying to work on and engage the public. They ended up starting to take it on, and we started to work together more. Whereas initially it was kind of like, well, you know, traditionally cities don't play that energy game, you know. We don't have, obviously we're not a municipal energy provider. So it was kind of the silo effect. And as we started to understand one another and listen to one another and respect one another, we were able to then move forward on a project alignment. And, you know, here it is today that we actually have that in the city. So I would just say patience and perseverance. If it's meant to be, it will happen.
Yeah, and you know, and a theme I'm hearing come up again and again is that important relationship between local governments and tribes and their utility, and how you can nurture that relationship and identify shared goals and work through both projects and programs together to help work really at all scales of renewables. You know, the city of Madison established a memorandum of understanding with MG&E several years ago, and that has really helped the city and the local utility make a number of significant milestones towards renewable energy. I know that, you know, Dane County and utilities have been working hand in glove, City of Eau Claire, and the River Falls utility story, for those of you who are not familiar with it, please check out what River Falls has been doing. There's a lot of great stories out there, and working with your utility is one of the most effective ways to get things done, because they are supplying all the electricity for your community. So that's a great way to get started on making progress on transitioning the entire community, not just city operations, to renewable energy. All right, these questions are coming in. We are seeing really, really great input in the chat. People from all over Wisconsin talking about their clean energy champion work. Oshkosh is represented, seeing folks from really all over here. So thanks for weighing in. Please keep them coming. I see Wood County Fond du Lac County, Beloit, Wisconsin, Oregon, River Falls, shout out. Portage County. So things are really happening. Question for Kathy and all of our panelists. What are the pros or the benefits of working on a local scale versus having things come down from the federal level? And are you excited about the Biden Clean Energy Plan?
So I am excited about the Biden Clean Energy Plan. I saw in one of those chats or questions, people were asking, do folks think that there's going to be opportunities for some innovative programming? And I'm sure hopeful that there's going to be stimulus funds that let us accelerate our clean energy efforts at a local level.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. I spent most of my career in the nonprofit world thinking about these things at a variety of scales. For me, the county level is really satisfying because we're big enough to make a difference and we're small enough to get things done. That there's that flexibility. We were talking before we started about when we have partners who can be agile about things. And, at a local level, that's possible in a way that it's trickier to do federal policy and have one solution for the country, which is why I'm hopeful that we're going to see some opportunities to innovate and figure out what really works for Wisconsin, given our landscape, given our climate, given our regulatory environment.
Great. Let me turn to Daniel with that question, especially because you're working with the federal government with their Department of Energy grant. Can you tell us, how you feel about the dynamic between leading at the local level and federal leadership?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think on a federal level, I think with almost all tribes, unless you're a fortunate tribe that's doing very good. The Bad River tribe is not wealthy, for one. So on a federal level, we use a lot of grants and stuff to really start up a lot of the big projects. Without those grants and without those initiatives that come from Biden's Clean Energy Plan, we'll say I'm looking forward to it. But without those federal initiatives, I think the tribe would have a really hard time with just jumpstarting a lot of their big projects. On a local level, I think that's really where we get, a lot of our energy and stuff to do these projects. Again, where I think we're all in it to do the right thing and to do clean energy projects. So on a local level, that's really where we get our drive. We really get our information and our data and stuff from the community about what they want to see. So on a local level, I think it's the most important part of the project. And, really on a local government level, they're the ones who identify the clear initiatives and pathways for us to get the job done.
Absolutely. Ned, how about you? And let me add to this conversation, the most recent stimulus package, which had a number of investments in renewable energy research, battery technology and things like that. And if you have any thoughts about where you're hoping that investment will support your work or support Wisconsin's energy transition.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to multitask here with answering some questions on the chat.
Yeah, there's great questions in the chat.
Yeah, so refresh my memory on the original question.
So the original question is, sort of
the local and federal.
What's more important, local investment and focus or federal efforts to shift to renewable energy, how those dynamics play out?
Yeah, obviously both are important, but on the local level, yeah, the leadership needs to be there. So I think that also translates to funding. At least with our city, we created a renewable energy investment fund. So we actually have a dedicated capital improvement investment fund that we can fund projects and then also leverage for grants and federal funding. So, as we all can assume, I think we're just going to be able to see more funding come down the pike from the feds, whether it's direct or through the state energy offices. And so I think the state energy office is probably, or the PSC is probably very excited about those potentials as well for that to flow through for state buildings, but then also for local governments, local communities, and to retool and to rethink too about how we also address equity and concerns where some of the marginalized might not have, as best access to the clean energy resources. So rethinking about that too. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Ned, before I let you go, we got a question here about what is the tipping point, the number of council members you need to have be clean energy champions to be able to do the kind of work you've been doing in the city of Eau Claire and make real progress. What proportion would you consider high enough to establish a critical mass shift in a local government body?
Well, yeah, again, I'm just a staffer, so you don't really know how things play out. But as I answered the question there, at least at the city, when we passed our goals back in 2018 for carbon neutrality, we had conservatives and liberals or progressives or whatever you want to say, and it was unanimous. We had to explain to those that are more conservative that this is a transition. We're not going to just ban fossil fuels overnight. We have to keep in mind people's safety. We live in a cold climate. So as they were able to see, kind of realistically that this is going to require a transition and all working together, I think that helped maybe those that were more reluctant to pass ambitious goals to then, so to speak, see the light. And like I said, it was unanimous. So I can't really tell you outside of the fact that a majority counts.
Wonderful, thank you. I want to do a couple of shout outs to Portage County, Milwaukee County, Sun Prairie, Jefferson County. I mean, we have people from all over Wisconsin who are really clean energy champions. I really want to thank all the participants for making this a wonderful conversation. I have one question here from Mashiba Carr on, Eau Claire and Dane County are prominent sized cities and places in Wisconsin. How do those smaller villages or townships, how do they begin to dabble in renewable energy? And maybe I'll turn this question to Kathy. If you have partners who are smaller communities, how do they begin this work?
Sure. We've seen in Dane County a number of small communities, and by that I mean folks under 25,000 people, under 10,000 in some cases, who've set clean energy goals too. One of the stories I think of when I hear that question is in the town of Vermont in Western Dane County. So now I'm talking really small. They did a group solar buy. They had a couple of community meetings, and this goes back to Daniel's point earlier about climate risks. So in 2018, we had substantial flooding in Dane County. It's still very visceral in folks' minds. It prompted in Western Dane County people to start coming together and talking about how do we build better, what's in our future. And I think, there are lots of leverage points that communities can use. I've spent a lot of my career thinking about behavior change, and people are influenced by people like them. In a small community that's tighter, if you can start to shift that culture, it's going to be way more powerful than it is in big cities where folks don't necessarily know their neighbors. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and I'm happy to talk offline to someone, until you tell me to shut up about that.
Can you just, for those who might not be familiar, what is a group buy? How does someone get that started in their community?
So Renew and MREA both do group buy things. This was though like a local, I'm not even sure who ran the town of Vermont thing actually. It's people coming together and negotiating a deal with solar installers so that everybody gets an installation on their roof at a lower cost. What happens though, what I want to point out about that Vermont story, they had a lot of installs. So what can happen in a group buy is people come to the meeting and they say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, but then they go home and they, get busy. But when you say in a meeting you're going to do something and the other people in the meeting know you and they say hi to you in the grocery store, you're much more likely to follow through because we don't want to feel like we're flip-floppers. So there are ways that small communities can leverage that kind of social network to get much further than we get when we're talking about big places where folks don't necessarily know anyone in the grocery store.
Yep, and that reminds me, we have a session at 2 o'clock today that Green Penny mentioned earlier that's going to talk about energy districts. And so in Iowa, in the state of Iowa, there have been a number of energy districts established county by county, modeled on the concept of soil and water conservation districts to help folks advance their own energy goals or local energy goals. And we have energy districts emerging in Wisconsin as well. Vernon County and Iowa County are working on energy districts. So you'll hear from folks working on the Iowa County Energy District at that session as well. So there are a lot of ways that smaller communities have made major progress on working with their utilities, establishing a group by creating an energy district and setting goals. So there's a lot of great work out there. I want to mention here, we got a great comment in from the Office of Energy Innovation. Please do look at our chat. There's a link to the open grant program that has a great deal of funding to help local governments and communities shift to renewable energy and to work on their energy management. So hopefully you've been thinking about that, and the link is in the chat. I just want to thank all the attendees for making this a really great, dynamic, multifaceted conversation, and to our speakers. I have a question here from Katie Wickman. Have any of you worked with companies or nonprofits or academics in your city who also have aggressive renewable energy goals? And how do you work together with those partners? And what other opportunities might there be to partner? And I don't know who would like to chime in on partnerships with community organizations or academics or businesses. I'm seeing Ned turn his mic on.
Yeah, well, not everybody has this right in their community, but if you have a university or a technical college, you know, we are fortunate to be able to leverage great, you know, young, bright students to, you know, work on carbon footprinting, energy data, stuff that I just don't have the time to work on. So that's always helpful to be able to maybe even create like an academic partnership or some for credits. To you know, have a partnership with an academic institution like that. So that's one thing. We did for a while have our Chamber of Commerce have a green business program. They're trying to resurrect that, but that was really useful from the chamber's perspective. They had their own certification program. So that might be another idea for communities to talk to their chamber. And then I'll just share with our sustainability committee, we make sure that we've got both of our utilities on that, are appointed. And so right now we just have our IOU Excel Energy, but it's really great to have their voice and perspective at the table at that committee, because they're working on a lot of great things. And so we can bounce ideas off one another. And we ended up working in partnership with Excel on a Partners in Energy initiative that they do in Colorado and Minnesota. And that's starting to gain a little more traction with Menominee and I believe La Crosse as well. So at least in their service territory, they're starting to see the value of working directly with the communities that they serve in this partnership called Partners in Energy. So there's a lot of resources behind that. So those would be a couple ways of reaching out.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, Heather, and I kind of want to respond to that. I think a lot like what Ned said, I think they can really help with kind of pushing the projects and stuff, because me, Ned, and Kathy only have so much time and resources. We are likely all spread a little thin with not just this project, but with other projects and identifying work. And really, the tribe really utilized Chequamegon Bay Renewables, Check Bay Renewables in our local area, a nonprofit organization run by Bill Bailey. And we recognize him as a local leader right off the bat. And when we realized that we wanted to really get into the energy project, we reached out to that nonprofit, brought him in because he was successful, kind of with the solar group bias that Kathy mentioned. He was successful with a couple local solar group bias. And we just recognized the availability of the resource just with that nonprofit organization. So I think those coalitions and those nonprofit organizations can be great resources as far as to local and communities and really small communities.
Thank you.
I'll just add that one of the ways that we've started partnering with local businesses, nonprofits, and also local governments is through a recognition program. So we created a Climate Champions program, and we're calling out leadership at the corporate level, at the nonprofit level, for local governments. And part of our aim there is to give due recognition to those other leaders in our community. This is the Midwest. People do good things and they don't brag about it, because that's not who we are. If we were on the coasts, there'd be a lot more talk about some of these companies. So I keep telling them, let me brag about you. That's different. It's totally fine. But it also creates this opportunity there where we've now got significant companies in our market putting out social media saying we're a Dane County climate champion. And I know other employers are seeing that and going, okay, what is that? Why aren't we that? And, it's a way to mobilize through positive reinforcement.
Yes, yes. And when we're talking about partnerships, we've got a couple comments and questions in the chat about faith organizations. And Nancy Vetter-Schultz says, we're creating a faith ambassador program for Dane County to help faith organizations and their members become more sustainable. And those groups can be very effective in bringing congregations into the renewable world. Renew administers a program called Solar for Good, which helps congregations install solar panels. And those congregations often become leaders in their own communities, helping the community shift to renewable energy too. So there's just so much work with all these wonderful work with all these different partners who play a critical role in the clean energy transition. So we're coming up towards the end of this conversation. We will close this down at 11, and then we'll have a break for networking, and folks can visit exhibitors and set up meetings with panelists like these who have so much knowledge to share with you all, and vice versa. I think the conversations today will be really exciting. Our one-on-one session today is with Samara Hamzi. She is going to talk about Energy Literacy 101. So if you're just getting started in this conversation, you want to know what all the terms and the acronyms mean and how to get started, that's definitely for you. But before I jump to all the logistics, I want to give all our panelists one last question. Let us all know, what are you looking forward to in 2021 for renewable energy in your community? You look thoughtful, Daniel. Would you like to jump in?
I was looking at the other panelists to see who was going to go first. I think overall, I think 2021 is going to bring a number of great projects. I think with 2020, we can all relate to the numerous challenges with COVID and just in general. And I think absent of some of those challenges, I can't see why energy projects aren't just going to fly off the table this summer. But I'm also really interested in the tribe's continued growth. We've identified additional phases and additional projects to work within the community, specifically the residential sector, which was a big discussion here, because I think the residential sector can somewhat be not overlooked. I think we're always looking at it, but I think with the way funding is structured, sometimes it's real easy to not get into it right away. You're going to look at buildings, you're going to look at community and stuff of that. So I'm really interested in getting in kind of the residential sector and really looking at what the residents want to see on their houses and within their communities that directly affect them.
Fantastic. Ned, would you like to jump in and talk about what you expect this year with renewable energy?
Yeah, sorry, I can't get to everybody's questions here, but I was trying. Yeah, I think we're really excited about, so I'm a city planner, so I'm thinking about neighborhoods, right? I'm thinking about new buildings all the time as we have to approve them. And we're looking at an all-electric geothermal subdivision, potentially. That might take a couple of years to actually build out, but we're working with one of our largest home builders in the Chippewa Valley metro area to really make these homes energy efficient. Like I said, to have a geothermal energy district, this was brought up before about district energy, and to have a very low carbon electric vehicle level 2 charging in the garages. And so we're working with our partners, Excel Energy again, to start. Really, we're in the infant stage of this, but to brainstorm, how can we actually think about this from the utility perspective, from a builder, from a regulatory city planning perspective, from the actual users and homeowners, and how to make sure that they're safe, that they're functional, that they meet those clean energy goals. So I'm very excited about the beginning of planning something big like that, which could set forward a prototype for future residential subdivisions within our community in the state.
That is amazing. That is amazing. And let me mention Renew Wisconsin, and all of you are invited to join us May 23rd in 2021 to visit Eau Claire and visit their renewable energy projects in the community. And I can't wait to hear more about this project. That is very exciting. Okay, Kathy, tell us what you're looking forward to in the year ahead.
So really, I feel like as Renew has highlighted, we've seen a lot of solar growth in 2020, but we've kind of all been locked in our homes. So the first thing I'm looking forward to is that people get to engage with some of these projects that have gone on in our communities. And, that all helps accelerate growth forward. I think the other piece is really, I believe we're going to have a clean energy economic recovery, and I'm looking forward to what we can all do with that in Wisconsin.
Thank you. Thank you. Great way to end the conversation. I want to extend a huge thank you to our speakers. This was a really exciting conversation, and a big thank you to all the attendees who were putting questions in the chat and conversations. There's a wealth of information in this chat and this Q&A, so we'll figure out a way to share all that information with everybody. Certainly this session has been recorded, and that'll be available once we get all the sessions available. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to Green Penny for sponsoring this session today. I would like to encourage everyone to join today's industry conversations from 2 to 3, where a lot of these issues, from energy districts to working with your electric co-op to, there's just a lot of great stuff this afternoon. Healthcare, and how partnerships with renewable energy and healthcare are advancing clean energy in Wisconsin. So please do stay with us throughout the day and keep checking in. Many of our sponsors are represented in the virtual exhibitor space. Please visit the event website and click on exhibitors to learn more about and connect with these sponsors. It's not quite the same as a real conference where you can chat, but you can get to know people, ask specific questions, and you'll find that it's really a great opportunity to connect. Many also have virtual video meeting space hours scheduled where you can pop in for immediate conversation with those organizations. And there's just a lot of opportunities throughout the event space to check out. Don't forget, we've got the clean energy, we've got the renewable energy stories, the year in review from Michael Vickerman's on the event space page, and just the 2020 Renewable Energy Awards in Wisconsin. Those are videos that you can access at any time through the summit. And we hope that you check those out, because there's some great stories from 2020, as you can tell from this conversation. Thank you all once again. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you back at the 101 Energy Literacy session at noon. All right, have a great day, and we'll keep seeing you throughout the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.